Sup? Welcome to the unofficial Tedeschi Trucks podcast. This is episode number 77, and I am Adam Choit. To follow this show, it's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram, and on YouTube, just search Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. If you are watching, you are already there. I'm at Adam Choit on Twitter and Instagram if you want to follow me, and please be sure to subscribe and give the show a positive review on Apple Podcasts. That is greatly appreciated. And of course, is subscribing on whatever platform you are listening to podcasts on. Subscribing is definitely appreciated. I have another podcast called People We Love. What I do with that one is interview people from all walks of life, most often comedians and other entertainment types, about their lives and careers. It's casual conversation, but I also ask everyone to highlight the people they love. That show is definitely a lot of fun. Please check that out as well. peoplewelovepodcast.com, at peoplewelovepodcast on Instagram for that one. But for today's episode of this podcast, we have a special one with Tedeschi Trucks Band's own recordist, engineer, roadie, and much more, the one and only Bobby Tees. A drummer himself, playing since he could remember, we cover Bobby's background growing up on Long Island, learning from Dad Bob Sr., how he first got connected to Derek Trucks, and a lot more, including talking about TTB's discography, Bobby's studio work and tour work, and of course we chat all about the band's latest epic project, the I Am the Moon album. But let's just get started. Here's Bobby Tees. Okay, so it's good to see you today, Bobby Tees. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adam.
Oh, for sure. How are you holding up during whatever year this is?
Oh yeah, 2022. Yeah, it's not a bad year so far. Been busy. Been making a lot of records recently, so that's good, and which I love to do. So yeah, it's been a cool year. It's been a good year. We just had some time off here. I just had a family vacation, just getting back from that, enjoying a little time at home before we get started on Wheels of Soul next week.
And you're in Jacksonville right now. Is that where you are?
Yeah, my house in Jacksonville.
Right, of course. You have to be close by in case you're needed at a moment's notice. Is that the case?
This might be too close. I don't know. We'll have to ask them, but it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to be too far away. And yeah, we're gonna get into it, all the TTB stuff, the I Am the Moon stuff. But I want to talk a little bit about your background and your history in music. And I kind of want to ask you what your real earliest music memories are that jump out at you, even when you were elementary school age or younger. What were there songs playing around the house, or do you just remember your dad working, or what jumps out at you from the early days?
Yeah, so there was always music coming into our house. There was always music playing in our house, really, on weekends and stuff. Like whenever my dad or my mom were around together in the house, generally there was a bit of music playing. And I don't remember specific stuff playing. There was a lot of Bob Marley. My dad was into all the classic rock. There was a lot of Beatles. My mom had some favorites. She loved Stevie Wonder. So there was all sorts of good stuff playing around the house. But most of my earliest music memories are because my dad was in the biz, and back then in the studios would get offered tickets to shows and stuff, when bands came through, and he would often get offered tickets to big shows, and so he would take me once in a while to some of these bigger shows. And I remember seeing the Rolling Stones at Shea Stadium when I was about 7 or 8. Must have been Honky Tonk Woman tour or something. They had these giant inflatables, and I'll never forget, we were sitting in one of the first, or actually we had some floor seats, but I remember we walked back up and we were in one of the balconies during, I don't remember which song, but a hit song, one of their big hits is playing, and the whole balcony is rocking. You could feel it standing there. I was like a 7-year-old, and I just remember kind of frightening me, but also just being mesmerized by the fact that there was this energy amongst a group of people at a show. And that totally got me addicted to live music and the large concert setting, for sure.
And where did you say you grew up? Did you grow up in New York?
Yeah, I grew up on Long Island. So.
As did I. That's funny, because I knew you had a Long Island history, going back and listening to some.
I was born and raised on Long Island. I didn't get out of here until I started working for Derek, or I didn't get out of Long Island until I started working for Derek in 2006. Or I started working for Derek before that, but I moved to Atlanta, I think, in 2006. Yeah.
Where about on Long Island were you?
I grew up on the East End in Rocky Point. My dad had started working for so my dad worked for the band Foghat in the late 70s, and he started working at a recording studio that they had built in Port Jefferson, Long Island, which is on the East End. And so he bought a house out there just because he loved it out there. You know, he was from Nassau County growing up, but he liked it out there when he went out there to that studio. And my parents still live in that house.
Very, very cool. You know, I've been to many Met games at Shea Stadium, Mets games over
Yeah,
the
me
years,
too, man.
and I've been up there into the upper decks and the higher sections at times that they've been shaking. So I
You
know
know that
exactly what you're talking
feeling,
about. It,
man.
it was an older ballpark. I mean, it became an older ballpark, and when
Yeah,
the upper deck was full, that it would shake.
yeah, man.
It's kind of fun though.
It was kind of fun, but a little bit terrifying at the same time.
Tell me about how you got into playing drums, because I learned that that's what
Yeah,
your
so that's
background
like
is. Why
that's
drums? Why not guitar? Why not something else?
yeah, yeah. You know, I'm not really sure what drew me to the drums early on. It may have just, you know, who doesn't like drums when you're 3 or 4? Like I was literally 3 or 4 probably when my, you know, it was one of those things where actually, you know, what probably led to it is that there's always a drum kit set up in a recording studio. I mean, there's always a piano around, but there's always a drum kit usually set up too. And I feel like it was probably days where I ended up at the studio with my dad because, you know, there was nobody to watch me or whatever, and my mom needed a break. And my dad would, if there was no session going on, my dad would take me to the studio, let me run around the playing room. I could bring my own toys, but I would, and he would give me drumsticks and sit me at a drum set because I liked it for one reason or another. I really don't know what drew me there because I barely remember starting to play. It's one of those funny things where I don't really remember a point in my life where I don't know how to play drums.
Wow. You know,
So
yeah, you know what I think it is? I think it's just something that's purely physical also playing the drums, and like percussion, I think is that's I had this conversation actually yesterday with a friend that I think it's like the first instrument that we all learn is really playing percussive instruments, stomping our feet, clapping our hands, hitting objects that are around the house. Like I think that's
it's
kind of like the
just
first,
almost as inherent as as you know being able to sing.
right? And what about that? Where did you sing at all?
Uh, I definitely would sang in church choir growing up, and like I was in some chorus stuff in high school, or no, not in high school, in probably middle school. In high school, I started really like focusing on instruments, but uh, yeah, no, I really kind of moved from drums, and then learning music theory kind of led me to playing piano, and I was also having to play bells in school and stuff. So all that stuff sort of now like now I play a bit of piano, put a bit of guitar, and still mostly drums. But
Are you beyond bar chords on guitar? Because that's what you
yeah, so
mentioned.
I'm beyond bar
That
chords.
was 4 years ago, like 4 years ago. So
Yeah,
you've come a long way too in that
COVID
regard.
COVID really helped me to hone some more musical skills. To be honest with you, I started teaching my daughter piano, and that sort of like led me back to the piano, which my skills on piano had topped out at like college level chord comping just to get by and understand how to voice chords. But yeah, COVID was one of those opportunities. Yeah, another silver lining of COVID. I got to dive into some music with my daughter who's really into it. And yeah, really cool.
That's very cool. I'm gonna jump around a little bit, but it just what you're talking about makes me wonder if you're writing any of your own music, or do you have any aspirations to record or perform as in a band or something like that of your own?
I'll. I mean, there's nothing that I would never turn down the opportunity. I mean, everything's time prohibitive, you know. I would never turn down the opportunity to play with other musicians in some capacity. You know, if time allowed me to do that. But I don't really have aspirations as a songwriter. You know, if I stumble across something, I usually pass it on to one of my friends who's a better songwriter. And similarly with the playing thing, I'm not like itching to be in a band or be the musician. I would never shy away from it, and I'm confident in my playing and all that stuff that you might be thinking. But the reality is, I find what I do on the other side of the glass or other side of the console to be in service to musicians who are on a different level than I maybe could ever be, and that's just like their thinking versus my thinking. And so maybe my thinking leads me more to the technical side of things. I love music and I love playing music, but I really, really love being in service to musicians of a higher power than myself.
No, that's very cool. That's a cool attitude and approach. And like you're saying, you could still you're playing music with your daughter. You're still playing all these instruments. It's still such a
And
huge
music's
part of your
such a
life
huge
in
part of
terms
my
of
life that yeah,
enjoyment.
I don't need to be in the spotlight or be in the band, although all these TTV guys are constantly you are in the band, that's what they say. And like, being on the crew at TTV, it does feel like you're in a band anyway. But anyway, the what I'm getting at is that, with being around somebody like Derek for so long and Susan as well, and everybody that has played with them, their surrounding bands, like they're just so on a certain level of musicianship that I never found myself understimulated by the musicianship to the point where I would be like, hey, you should do what I'm thinking of. They're always so far ahead of that like I never find myself bored or yeah, or trying to get involved in that way.
And you know what? You are on stage a lot. Like, I mean, before the show, obviously a lot as well, but like so much of your life is literally spent on the stage. And you guys, as the crew and who puts the sound and the whole show together, really are part of the band. And I can't help but think about like reading about the Allman Brothers and really those first early tours with like that real skeleton crew of roadies who like loved the band unconditionally and did everything for them. And
Almost brothers, yeah.
it seems like TTB has a similar, although less reckless, family atmosphere. Like that's almost like comparable to that. Would you say there's something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, that and that comes from the top down, really. Like Derek and Sue are very much about uh, having that kind of organization. Um, I mean, we've always had to play games, or not games, but we've always had to tread lightly economically because uh, touring is touring is it used to be supported by labels and all this stuff, and there was a lot more money to go out there to support production and stuff. So we've always had a different economical game, but the idea of having a tight knit crew and the same people on your tour all the time, that's that Allman Brothers mentality, and that's what makes a family like crew. And you know there's a lot of tours these days where an artist makes an album and they don't tour nonstop like we do. They make an album, they're done making their album, and you don't, they tour to support that album for 6 months or a year. They do a worldwide tour, maybe stop everywhere once, and then they're done. There's not more shows. And I guess to a certain part of the world, that's the way it is for them, even with us, because we only get to Europe and Japan and these types of places every couple of years. But in the US, we play constantly. So it's a bit of it's a different thing to be able to have the same people on the tour all the time. And what makes that possible is how much we tour, really. We're constantly on the road. If you're only touring every few years, it's hard to have a tight knit family like that because people have to make money, and you can't afford to, most people can't afford to pay everybody's salaries while they're off for 2 years. So.
Got to have a lot of people crunching numbers to figure all those things out. Tell me about the story of how you got connected with Derek, and I think it was 2005 in Long Island, and tell me
Yeah,
about
West
that.
Hampton Beach. So it's West Hampton Beach Performing Arts Center. I was working for a local sound company on Long Island called SK Systems. A guy named Tom Heinisch, who still owns the company and probably still does work at West Hampton Beach, I'm pretty sure. Uh, but so basically, I lived furthest east on the island. It's in West Hampton Beach. It's pretty far east. Out of all the guys who were working there at the time, besides the owner, I lived the furthest east. So that gig sort of became mine when it popped up on the schedule. And what would happen is they had their own PA system in there and their own production setup that we had put in with that company. But anytime an artist needed something more than that, we would get a call and somebody would have to go out there and bring the gear and be on the crew for the day. And so I got the call on the day, and basically it was, show up at West Hampton Beach tomorrow. Derek Trucks Band's playing. Here's the gear you're bringing. Blah blah blah. So basically I show up on, it's basically very happenstance that I end up on the gig. You know, it's just I'm doing my job, and that's my job for the day is Derek Trucks Band. And so do the whole. So they come in and they had just Joe Main, Derek's longtime tech, had just recently come off the road to deal with some family stuff, and so they had a new guy on the road with them. His name escapes me, Matt something or another. And Matt was doing the best he could for sure, and he was doing a good job. And I know that he went on and is a very good, or still is a very good guitar tech and works. Um, he was having some trouble with like getting drums and other stuff done, which was kind of a second nature thing to me at the time. I'm a gigging drummer doing sound to make a living while I'm playing with multiple bands, and so I basically just made quick friends with Marty Wall, who was Derek's sound guy at the time. Made sort of quick friends with him, just shooting the shit on stage and just talking about regular stuff. But also that, hey, you want me to help you with that? I can help you with those drums. And he was like, yeah, heck yeah, this guy, he's telling me that Matt's new and they're trying to figure some stuff out. And if there's anything I can do to help out with that, that would be great. And so I hopped in and basically set up Rico's whole kit from like a picture. And apparently it went pretty good. But anyway, by the end of the day, it was Marty's birthday. I'll never forget that. And we went out for some drinks after the show. And like, he had been questioning me a little bit about what I was doing, but I didn't really catch on that he was going to offer me a gig. And then about like 2 weeks later, I think they called and were like, hey, what are you doing? Can you come out on the road? And so I ended up going out on the road probably that fall. I want to say it was like 2005 fall. And yeah, one of my first runs was in Europe. It was crazy. It just sort of snowballed just because of, it was definitely right place, right time stuff,
Yeah,
getting with Derek.
that's
Sure.
amazing. It's just, and that all happened in one day where you made this really
Yeah, it was
big
one day.
impact, and you didn't even interact with Derek directly or even his management
Not
or
really.
anything at that time.
Maybe like a hey man or what up during the, like while they're coming on stage. I was just manning the monitor console. I was like, we're about the same age, me and Derek. So it's like, yeah, I might have given him like, what's up? And, but like at the time, I was only sort of aware of Derek. Like I knew who he was. I was into some jam bands, so I'd heard his name on the scene. I played at Wetlands a lot with the band, a couple of the bands I was in, and they would play there. So I'd see them on the Wetlands schedule. There was like some things that like I was aware of him for sure, but I wasn't totally like I wasn't a fan yet.
Yeah.
But after that night, I was totally fucking.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just sounds like that day you worked hard, you had a good attitude, you had a good like disposition and demeanor, and you went out of your way to
Good
help
day.
people, and you showed that you had some skills and just
Yeah.
agreeable person, and just like that combination of things, like
Yeah. Man.
with having some good luck, like you say, but it's not just good luck, like you earned that
No, I
spot. They
heard
didn't offer.
getting to there. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you had to be prepared to be ready for that moment, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, tell me more about like TTB. I mean, you've done like a million different shows. Like, I always think about like, do musicians remember every show? Do they only remember the big shows? Do they remember great moments or bad moments? Like, how does like being a touring musician like
Yeah.
affect the memory? Do you remember the same people that you see over and over again?
Yeah. So
How does that work?
yeah. So people over and over again. I'm personally way better with faces than names. Um, Names are like, I always say like 3, 4 times and then I got your name. But like, if I'm seeing somebody for the second time, I'll remember their face, but not their name. So it's like, and that happens a lot on the road. And then, like you're saying, with big shows, small shows, good shows, bad shows, uh, you remember the extremes for sure. There's no doubt that you remember all the smallest ones you had to pack everything into, the biggest ones that you maybe didn't fill, or the biggest ones you've seen full, or whatever. I mean, you definitely remember a lot of the extremes. And the other ones, unfortunately, are the worst ones that you remember. You're like, oh God, remember that disaster? Yeah, I mean, of course you remember the great ones too, but yeah, there's a lot. There's something to be said for the ones you don't remember are actually the ones that are probably the reason you get to do the great ones. You know, like there's so much that happens when you're just chugging along. And a lot of that is really great without it being overhyped or even anybody realizing it's great at the moment.
Yep.
And so I think that's a lot of the time where like most of the ground is made is when you're just cruising along. But yeah, you definitely remember all the extremes, that's for sure.
I feel like just as a fan, and I'm biased, like just listening to so many Tedeschi Trucks Band live shows and going back and listening to so many Derek Trucks Band live shows that fans have recorded, it's hard for me to imagine that like there's such a thing for Derek and the bands he's been part of as having a bad show or having something that's extremely, extreme in a negative sense. Is that just more you guys just like really being dedicated to what you guys do and wanting to strive for not
Yeah,
perfection,
yeah, no
but
doubt.
high levels, just the highest level stuff that you can produce. Is that kind of
Totally. Well, and coming from like, okay, so my side is even maybe a little bit different, being that I've come from I'm talking like from a production crew side where like there might be some things that are terrible that happen during the day that nobody would ever notice at the
right?
show. You know, like if we show up and maybe we only have half of the amount of local hands that we're supposed to have or something, that's terrible for us. Like that's a terrible day. But by the time showtime comes around, nobody would know. You know, we make that type of stuff happen. So, you know, bad day for me is I remember bad things like that. Like I'll never forget that I showed up in this city and they gave us half a crew because somebody didn't pay attention. You know, it's stuff like that. It's not anything ever usually catastrophic. So that's good.
For sure. I mean, I'm not sure what direction to go in, so it's almost like I want to just go chronologically and just ask you about like Revelator and what you remember about that era of Tedeschi Trucks Band, like 2010, 11, 12, like early
All
on,
right,
like
the earliest
highlights
days.
or this any of the songs that jump out at you that you have stories about or anecdotes.
Man, I loved so some of those early some like early Revelator songs and some of the earliest co-writing sessions. I remember those pretty well because that was something new for me. Even like we were writing tunes for an album, and I was working with Derek and Susan, you know, like in the studio while they were working on their own ideas, but also they kept having friends come in to write with them, and so that was like maybe the first time I had been in writing sessions with my own bands before, but that was the first time got to witness like other artists like truly writing, like from beginning, you know, like this is where their song comes from. And it was incredibly enlightening. And yeah, some of my like writing with John Leventhal, they did Until You Remember. I'll never forget sort of hearing that for the first time. And Gary Loris. All the writing sessions with Gary Loris were amazing. The Simple Things and the Revelator ones, and then there was the session with him for Made Up Mind was pretty epic too. That's where Idle Wind came from. I'm like, yeah, so getting to meet those guys and do those. Definitely meeting Gary Loris sticks out in my head because I was a Jayhawks fan in high school, and he's in the Jayhawks, and so like I was pretty excited to meet Gary Loris. I think I might even picked him up at the airport. I was pretty excited, but he's a great dude, and yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, just to think about what it might be like, I'm like thinking what it's like to be you listening to Until You Remember for the first time and hearing Simple Things for the first time. I mean,
Yeah, and it's
is
like before there's any instrumentation and you know, but that's sort of the beauty of it is like, you know, yeah, I mean, definitely that's the type of thing that I feel humbled to be involved in or lucky to be in the room for. You know, it's like I'm there out of a necessity. They want to capture it, but yeah, I'm lucky to be there for sure. And but it's yeah, those are the things, those are the times where I really do feel lucky, you know, because it's pretty intimate situation. You know, you're working out words and it's cool. You know, watching that new, have you seen the new Beatles Disney thing?
Was it the one where they updated all the
It's
footage to be in HD or whatever?
it's the Let It Be
Let it,
section.
yeah, yeah. I saw the first like first part of it for part of
There's a
it. Yeah.
lot of that movie that just rings so true with how Derek and Sue do writing sessions and stuff, where they're just like throwing stuff at the wall, spitballing, and like certain stuff sticks. And like, it's just, that's how songs are written. It's really true. I know a lot of people's minds were blown by all that Beatles stuff, and mine was too. But yeah, it's kind of funny uh, to realize how close to what they were doing we still do to write a tune. You know?
Yeah. Do you ever feel like, or did you feel like when you were watching Derek and Susan write and the band write and put these songs together, that like they would try something and in your mind you're like, that's awesome, that sounds so great, you should totally do that, I can't wait to hear that on record, and they're like, no, that's not that good, we need to keep working on it, and then they do the new thing and you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense, that's awesome. Is that kind of what it is
That
to the
definitely
next?
happens. It happens. Like I can't remember a specific time when it has happened, but yeah, it definitely happens. And vice versa too, where like I'll think we can do a better one, and maybe they'll agree with me and do another, or they'll appease me and do another one. And we already had it 2 takes ago. We were all wrong. We had it on the first one, you know. So like, yeah, all that stuff definitely happens. And yeah, there's certain times where Derek or Susan will just be like, yeah, it wasn't the right approach. Let's do it again. And I will be like, I can't see how we could do it better. And they'll be right, you know. So yeah, stuff like that definitely occurs while I watch them work like that. Yeah, it definitely happens where, and the, you know, they'll question themselves. They're so true to the art that they yeah, you know, they're not they're confident to the right point, but they always want to serve the music. So they're, it's very much the music will dictate it, you know, whether it works or not. Everything's worth a try.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it just seems like they have such a great approach to their crafts their craft and their various crafts as musicians. Like, and it's just everything comes naturally and it very organically and just very true to like the artistic process. I feel like whatever,
Yeah,
however one defines that, regardless of what art venture they go towards, like it just
yeah,
seems like they're honest with themselves when they need to push harder or something's not working or something is working,
yeah,
and hearing different ideas and throwing things at the wall is just such a big part of the process, is just being free to try different things and being open
yeah.
to ideas.
It's a yeah. It's very it is. It's a humbling process to watch. To watch how they bow down to the music, you know, you better be also sort of bowing down to. They're trying to serve it so hard. It's yeah, they're trying so hard to serve the music properly that you know, it makes everybody around them take their job seriously. You
Yeah,
know,
and I think fans definitely know that and definitely appreciate that. And I think that's a big part of the whole like Tedeschi Trucks Band fan community, is that we recognize the seriousness in which Derek and Susan and the band like takes the music. Not that they're like uptight people or anything like that. They're quite,
oh, nothing
the
uptight.
opposite. Yeah, but just they're serious musicians, and the music is always that, prioritized.
Yeah, music is worth it. It's kind of how we look at it. You know? It's like, but you know, it can be, it should be fun, and it should be fun, but it's not a joke, right?
Right. Right. That makes perfect sense. Tell me any other highlights that jump out at you, maybe from like the early-ish first half of
Oh,
Tedeschi Trucks Band.
Jim
I,
Scott.
I
Jim
what
Scott is one of the biggest things that jumps out at me from like the first TTB records, because
what's that?
Jim Scott, do you know, he produced a lot of the TTB records, and he's a engineer producer. He's from California. Uh, he's in my book, he's big time, right? And so when we get ready to make Revelator and Made Up Mind, well, first Revelator, of course. So when we're getting ready to make Revelator, the band was on Sony. People started talking about who's going to produce it, blah blah blah. Jim had just produced a Wood Brothers record that we all fell in love with. Tyler had just worked with him. JJ had worked with Jim. So there was a lot of cross connecting with Jim. And to me, I was like, I would love to work with Jim Scott. I hope I get the chance, knowing that he's an engineer producer. I'm like, if they get Jim, I'm out. You know, like that in my head, I was like, I'm not even gonna have a job. and then on the record, and then but I was wrong about that. Jim came out, we did some sessions together. Me and Jim struck up a huge, we're still really tight, um and yeah, so that was like one of the biggest things, and Jim sort of has a lot to do with like where TTB, what TTB sounds like on record in the early days. He had a very, we were all trying to figure out what it was during Revelator. None of us really knew. And Jim had this experience of making very good records that gave us all a bit of ease that, like, if Jim liked it, it had to be good. And then Jim took it home and mixed it out in LA. And when we all heard it, we were like, well, thank God for Jim Scott, and then, yeah, of course, that record went on to win a Grammy. So he is obviously, yeah, we were obviously had the right feeling. But yeah, and so getting to work with Jim was huge for me professionally. I learned a ton from him and continued to make records with him, and I hope to make more records with him. I mean, we're still working on records together in some way or another right now, but it's yeah, it's he's one of the biggest things that stick out for me. I'm so thankful to know him, and that all comes from TTB. And I do think that Jim has a lot to do with the success of their early records. So.
Very cool. Very cool. What about doing the Mad Dogs reunion show in 2016? Because that was definitely a challenge. You
My
were
gosh,
talking
yeah,
about
like
to put that together.
any of those, yeah, that and the Layla one, and so yeah, especially the Mad Dogs one. That one had to be dealt with in very like for me, it gets real nerdy. It comes down to like the mathematics of can we do this? Like what we had to get, there has to be extra inputs. We're already a 12-piece band, so we max out most modern equipment anyway. So now we were going to have to add a bunch of equipment. Of course, we had to add tons of equipment, and it's just there was a lot of moving parts to put together to make that show go smoothly, especially at a festival. That's not an easy show to put on, and then to try and do it at a festival is just a whole nother level of crazy. But we, the festival, Pete Shapiro and everybody involved, they gave us the tools we needed to make that happen. And yeah, I mean, it's an honor to be able to do things like that, to like put on a performance of Mad Dogs and Englishmen. I mean, these are records that like they're before me, but they're still what I held up high as an early 20-something-year-old finding those records. Like I'll never, yeah, before, way before that, this might be back in 2007 or 8. I can remember Derek coming by my place in Atlanta. He had Allman Brothers were rehearsing in Atlanta. He needed to do some laundry. Came over to my house in Atlanta, and we spun that Mad Dogs record that day. And I kind of remember playing Space Captain and being like, man, we got to do this song. And that was way before they ever started doing it. So maybe it had something to do with them finding that record again. Not
No,
really.
no, they've talked about like the Mad Dogs and Englishmen having an influence on like the whole idea of Tedeschi Trucks Band and having this like
Yeah,
circus on
totally.
stage. And I think it was from watching the original movie
Yeah,
together,
right.
Susan and
So
Derek.
we all sort of like, I remember after spinning that record, of course, Derek was aware of it that day. I just remember from that point on, and maybe this is just me personally because of the way it ties into my timeline, is just like from that point, I kind of remember Mad Dogs becoming more of a conversation like overall. And it was just we had played some other Leon Russell records that day. We were just skimming through my records while he was doing his laundry, and like, yeah, it was pretty fun. And I remember that was, but anyway, getting back to doing that show, like being able to serve somebody like Leon or, Claudia and, you know, any of these original guys from the band, like Chuck Blackwell was there and Bobby Torres and Pamela, there was just a lot of Chris Staten, who's just a a giant in my opinion. Now these are amazing folks that have put so much of their life into music, and they're on countless albums that I love. And so yeah, to get up and be able to do my job for folks like that, it's an honor. There's nothing I'd rather do. Yeah.
And the Learning to Live Together documentary was awesome, and it captures the essence and the spirit, a lot of what you're just been describing moments ago in the movie. And just the songs are amazing, of course, and just the thought of TTB and current musicians keeping that music alive is a cool thing and an important thing. And the music is just great. It's just soulful, timeless
Yeah,
music that, like, I
I
just
think
will never get sick of.
half the tunes on that album are covers. It's like it's all over the board. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
for sure. What about after
It's like a
after
TV show.
right? I was gonna ask, what about after Lock in 2016, like getting into to Let Me Get By and
Yeah,
Signs? Like,
right.
what? Tell me more about that era of TTB.
Yeah, so Let Me Get By, man. That era is definitely a little cloudy for me. Like that era moves fast. We were working hard, making we made Let Me Get By like between touring. It was all like 1 week sessions between touring, just kept piecing it together and piecing it together. That was the first TTB record I did by myself. So like because we were doing it between touring, and it was it just became the thing where like we would come home from tour and go into the studio, and I was engineering myself and didn't have an assistant and was kind of taking poor notes and but getting through it and just doing it all myself, and ended up mixing that one. My dad came down. We had a really cool mixing session. He assisted me on the mixing. That was awesome. And then really cool experience for me, of course, to have my dad as my assistant on a record I'm mixing.
The tables have turned.
Oh, it was also probably no, it's definitely my first major label mix release for sure. So that's cool.
What about any of the specific tracks? Do you have any memories of any of those tracks that
Oh yeah,
really
I mean,
stick out at you?
definitely just like uh, there's so many Kofi moments that stand out for me on that album, and specifically the couple of flute moments, and there's and Let Me Get By, like that whole organ thing is like that. And same with Midnight in Harlem on Revelator. Like those are just sessions where you're like, Kofi comes in and sort of does his magic, and you're just like, when the take's over and you got to say something to him on the talkback mic, you just want to be like, thank you. I don't know what to say. Like, thank you. That's it. Come on in. Bring your stuff.
Yeah, that is some of the most like iconic TTB moments in their songs are really Kofi moments. I'm just thinking about the flute, obviously on Idle Wind, and the flute even on I Want More, and that outro part of the song
Yeah,
is just such a
yeah, totally. That's what I was thinking of on the I Want More is kind of a behemoth on that record. But
yeah. And thinking about Let Me Get By and the organ riff and him and Derek, how they would go at it, like
yeah,
with that just the beginning intro of the song, like that's what I would be like tuning in for, like, if
yeah,
I was lucky to hear a fan recording, I'd be like, how are Derek and Kofi gonna do that little back and forth riff? Because they would always do something like a little bit different. And on that song, Kofi would do like some of the most far out,
yeah, man.
spacey type solos on Let Me Get
Totally.
By that you would
And
not even think would
especially
fit with
when
that song,
totally, man.
but
And
do.
with Tim used to take that one to different places with Kofi, and that was such a interest. I loved that the dynamic between those two when they were in the band, and where they would take that solo specifically.
Yeah, a lot of good memories, amazing memories, and amazing songs. And I come back to it and go back to it like all the time. Of course, like not a day probably goes by where I'm not listening to some Kofi recording or something
Yeah,
live.
no, yeah, he comes up all the time around here.
Yeah, and I bet. And even when I'm just like listening to the band throughout my day, I'll be cooking, I'll be working out, but I will sometimes stop, be like, what was that sound? What did Kofi just do?
Yeah, no
Where did
doubt.
that come from? How do you even like think to do that? Like, I don't
Yeah.
even.
he was he was definitely a special creature.
Oh, for sure. What about Signs? Tell me about like
Signs.
this.
Okay, so Signs was like a freaking, for me it was like a giant science experiment, or no, more like an experiment in technology from the early 80s, really. Okay, so the way we made Signs was sort of like a technical feat. So up until then, we had been sort of using a hybrid of tape and Pro Tools to make our records. And on Signs, we wanted to leave it on tape. But there's not really enough tracks on the tape to get the whole band on the tape. So, but we really wanted to leave our main tracks on the tape, even for mixing. So that requires you to synchronize a couple of, you can do it a couple ways. You can synchronize a couple of tape recorders together, which is how they've been, that technology sort of works. You have to, it's a little bit archaic, but we figured out how to link up two synced time tape machines. Anyway, we now so for Signs, what we did was we made the computer our second tape machine and sort of linked the computer to the tape machine with some archaic time code protocols and devices that have an interesting story. I can tell you another time. My dad worked for this company. They designed this device, which is the only reason I was able to figure out how the hell it worked. But anyway, we so it was a technical feat in that we were using tape syncing that hasn't been used in a long time on very old tape decks that really weren't very good at syncing. And so it was a bit of a being like astronauts in the swamp. We don't have technicians crawling around Jacksonville like they might in LA or New York. And here we are, me and Jim Scott out in the swamp trying to synchronize computers and tape machines together. And we made it work. And of course it went very well, and everything worked out. But so Signs for me sticks out in that we kept everything that we could on tape, and everything even that ended up on the computer was, so at one point, was on tape. We managed to keep that true throughout all of it. But so the sound of tape is really prominent on that album, and so that one sticks out to me for that reason. Song wise, yeah, man. I mean, when I'm, if that's the technical side of it for me. As far as the music side of it for me, I mean, that record, I mean, that's the one that, like, I have a hard time listening to that without really thinking about Kofi the entire time. The whole thing. And of course, we didn't realize this while we were making it. And it's just so interesting how this shit becomes true. But it's true that it's a very Kofi centric record. We never intended it. I mean, nobody could have predicted he would die the day we released it. And it was, I mean, yeah, it's really strange the way the universe works like that. But that record turns out to be pretty Kofi centric for me in the best way possible. I think some of the most interesting stuff on that entire album, and I do really love that album, is Kofi. I mean, that holds true a lot of the time, but there's something just a little bit more special about Signs with Kofi's contributions, the flute, and on and Still Your Mind, and yeah, I mean, it's just, there's some amazing stuff on there that's so Signs to me, besides the technical feat that it was, is very much a totem of with Kofi sitting atop.
Yeah, no, I can follow all that. It's just it's just such a special album, and I think it was a masterpiece. And for me, like it was definitely the right album at the right time. Like just for me personally, and I
Yeah,
really connected to it, and all the songs are so powerful. It's a very emotional album, and I could use the same descriptions for all TTB albums and a lot of their songs, but something about this one really just really hit home for me. It was just the right music. It always is the right music at the right time with this
yeah,
band. I don't know.
that's the evolution of a band, man, and that's just the band being honest. And I think people who are into them, sort of the way some of the bigger fans are into them, when you're on the ride, everything makes sense, like we're all on the same ride, especially if you're in deep and reading about the band daily, like guys like you. So like, yeah, we're definitely going to feel like it's of the time. Well, what really fascinates me is that sometimes we hit it and sometimes we don't. And I don't think it ever has anything to do with the actual material or the artistic sense of the material. It more has to do with like the pulse of actual society. Sometimes it lines up better than others. And I agree with you. I think Signs was a very much perfect for the time it was released.
It's like almost hard to, from at least me, to pinpoint how musically, like maybe the band has grown either in their songwriting or in their style or different genres they cover. But it's just more of a feeling like you're describing, that you're along for the ride. And oh yeah, of course they would come out with Signs and all
Yeah.
these songs that they were putting out at this time, because I know all the music. I can feel all the music in me that they've created in the past. So this is just like, oh, this is what TTB is doing now. It's their sound, but it's also new things are happening. It's a good balance between what works for them, but also challenging themselves and coming up with new creative ideas and just keep things fresh for themselves and the fans.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the, I mean, that's what feeds the whole thing, really, is that their ability to continue the search, to never, not that they're not satisfied, and they're, of course, they're you know, they know that they're lucky folks and all that stuff. But yeah, the fact that they're always on the search for whatever is next is sort of what feeds the whole thing, you know.
It's a
And
job of an artist, I think, is
yeah,
to do
that's
that,
all.
is it not?
No, that's it. You're right. And they're true artists. There's no other end game here. Yeah. This isn't a get rich quick or a get rich forever or whatever. This is definitely about art, not money. Yeah.
A process. It's a
For pressure.
process. It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's an expression.
Well,
It's a
music is a journey. And that's something me and Derek used to talk about years ago, because I think we both had some situations with earlier bandmates and stuff where, like, there's people who are in music for life. Like, you're a lifer, and we knew this when we were 20, in our early 20s. We were like, we're lifers. And then there's like, half the guys, you start talking about this with the people you're playing in bands with in your 20s, all of a sudden you realize that, like, at least half of the people you're playing with, they're not lifers. They're not sure whether they ever would step foot in a tour bus and get out of here, or if they'd rather just keep waiting tables and being a local hero. And so, like, I think, we used to talk about often that, like, everybody in this organization is a lifer. And, like, so it's sort of a, yeah, you're either a lifer or you're not in the music business. And if you're not, you'll be found out.
Yeah. You'll find out about yourself if you are or you're not. Like,
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, you'll know in no time.
yeah, and it seemed like you knew, just going back to when you first joined the Derek Trucks Band on the road in 2005. Like, you had your own band, and you wanted to go out on the road, but some of your bandmates weren't able to commit to that. And your desire to be what you're describing as a lifer, I think that drive and that desire and that kind of kicked in when you got that offer, I guess, to like go on the
Yeah.
road for the first time.
I think something that's driven me, and this, and maybe maybe this isn't, maybe it's not a good thing that this is what's driven me. Maybe I'm a spiteful fuck. But basically, back in high school, when people used to ask me if I thought I was, are you really going to try for a career in music? And I would always say yes. And then, like, some teachers and parents and stuff and even some kids would be like, well, you better have a fallback plan. And so it became my mantra. It was like, I will never have a fallback plan. Like, if I have a fallback plan, I will fall back. So there is no fallback plan. I will have a career in music, or one way or another. And so it's always sort of been, yeah, I don't know why I knew this from a young age or whatever. I just I knew I always wanted to work in music. That's for sure. One way.
Not, I don't think that makes you a hater. I don't think that's a negative thing. I think that's a good thing. Like turning lemons into lemonade and wanting to prove doubters and haters and
Yeah,
skeptics
right,
wrong.
right.
It's perfectly okay to be inspired by that. And I would be disingenuous if I
I was
wasn't saying
inspired by it,
the
not
same is for me
yeah.
for sure. But I think what's might be important is that that's not the only reason I'm
Of
to
course
be
not. Yeah, of
motivated.
course
Yeah,
not.
but that could, you know what that does? I think that gets you through the tougher days, wanting to prove haters wrong, or you can lean on that when you need to. It doesn't have to,
Yeah,
like I'm saying.
exactly. They're all little tools to get through.
Right, right. I feel you. Okay, let's get into "I Am the Moon." Tell me about at least getting up into the first part. I was listening to a Derek interview. I forget who it was. It was recently. It was on YouTube, and he was starting to talk about the second and the ensuing
Ascension.
parts. But I want no spoilers from part two, part three, part four. So, yeah, I mean, give me an overview of your experience, I guess, getting into "I Am the Moon" and the first part of it.
Yeah. So you know, a lot has been said by everybody out, or by the band in interviews and stuff, and the the experience of being in lockdown and this whole thing coming. Okay, so again, I feel humbled and lucky to have been included on all of this from the earliest inception of the idea. And yeah, I feel very lucky to be in a place where that's my working relationship with Derek and Susan and Tedeschi Trucks Band, and it's amazing. I don't take it lightly by any means. So being involved from that level, I think I sort of hid, or not hid, but kept reserved to myself how important I thought the idea was from the beginning. I kind of had an inkling early on when I had heard this initial concept that it could be completely epic. And then once the songs started coming out of them, I kind of knew it was going to be amazing. And yeah, there the writing sessions and being at the farm for week here, week there throughout the pandemic, those uh those weeks that we were together sort of broke the pandemic for us. Like it, I mean, for better or for worse, we were all testing before we got together and all that stuff, but it's sort of like being able to look forward to, like, all right, we're going up to the farm for a week, we're going to be with our friend, like that sort of saved us a little bit, or it saved me, like just to have some socialization. I mean, me and Derek got pretty busy in the studio early on in the pandemic, but those sessions really became something to look forward to. And then when we started capturing the demos and original inceptions of these tunes, then it started getting really excited. Like when we would come home and have a week between writing sessions or whatever, just to like listen what we were working on, it started. And then of course, guys were making demos at home. Like the earliest version of I Am the Moon, Gabe made at home, like on GarageBand or something. And it was amazing. It was actually one of those things where, like, even till the end, we were like referencing Gabe's demo. Like, is it as good as Gabe's demo? It's got to be as good as Gabe's demo, So there was things like that. And yeah, those sessions really sort of, they were a bright light at the end of short tunnels of darkness, being stuck at home and in the middle of COVID. It was really cool. And of course, like I was saying, I felt really lucky to be there. So fast forwarding to like getting into the actual studio, which was probably like, it wasn't that long after. It was sort of, we went to the farm, did a handful of these writing sessions. I feel like that was leading through like August, through like maybe November. And then I feel like by December, we were in the studio and trying drummers out while simultaneously sort of recording and still demoing tunes and kind of locking down arrangements. At that point, I'm not sure. at that point, we may have even been looking, we didn't even know like what we were going to do. We just knew we had like 25 tunes, and we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen, if we were going to whittle it down, if we weren't going to, we just didn't know what was going on. But we just kept plugging away because it's what we were working on. And we knew that, you know, it'd present itself at some point. And getting into the studio with everybody, and then Isaac, the session that Isaac appeared on, that was sort of the beginning of the record, in I think almost everybody's opinion. In my opinion, for sure. Like that was the day that recording like really started. It was like that day that Isaac showed up.
What songs do you remember what songs were recorded or what you guys worked on that time? I guess I might not know
do,
the
but
song yet if it was any in the first
yeah,
part.
it's not. It hasn't been released yet. It hasn't been released yet. Yeah,
Keep me in
but,
suspense.
but it will. Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to. You know, I'm Derek and Sue. I'm sure we'll talk about this in an interview if
Oh,
they
I'm
have.
sure, yeah.
But I'm sure they have actually. But I can probably tell you the name of the song is "To Gary." I believe it's on episode 4 or
Yeah,
3.
all the tracks, if you dig deep on the website or on the
Yeah, so
places
that
where you can order, you can see all the names of the tracks.
yeah, I'm pretty sure DeGarry was the one that we were working on that first day. I can double check on that for you. But I'm pretty sure that may have been the very first time that Isaac and Falcon like ever recorded or played together, you know, and that's sort of
Wow. So the first time they played together was also the first day that they
it was on a
recorded,
recording session. Yeah.
which is on the new music being released.
Yeah. And
Wow.
we were recording the sessions because, well, I had been setting up the studio in preparation to like record these songs, like for real. And so it made sense to also record the drumming auditions that we were sort of doing, you know. Uh yeah, it was just we were up and running and recording, and why not? It was yeah, it was actually yeah, it was as organic as it gets, man. I haven't really, you know, there's not yeah, I mean, you don't really hear stuff like that unless you're listening to like some jazz, or you know, Rudy Van Gelder jazz record, where it's just like some dude, all people in the room playing together on something they've never even really played together before.
Yeah.
Pretty
Well,
cool.
I love Crescent. I love the first part, and I think it's a great strategy to release these songs in this manner, and just to hear Derek talking about it a little bit, like it
Yeah,
definitely makes a lot of sense because it kind of captures a little bit of that feeling when we're excited to hear an album for the first time, a new music, and having
yeah,
not really heard any of the tracks before when it's really fresh, and the fact that there are not 12 of them with 2 bonus tracks, you can really
exactly. I
get it.
think
We the fans love these 5 songs. Like we are
totally.
so people are listening to Passaquan and listening to all these songs like every day, and I'm count me in that
Yeah,
group for sure. So it's like the perfect amount, and like blink of an
we
eye,
really,
we got 4, 5, 6, 7 new whatever it is new songs coming
totally.
out. Like it's gonna be
We played it this
awesome.
way. We played it the way that it's sequenced and about to be released to the public so many times while we were making it. And we sort of did the experiment on ourselves, you know, like, or maybe Derek sort of mastermind that, but like we sort of did the experiment on ourselves where like we listened to an episode, you know, this is, you know, just rough mixes while we're still working on the record. But like we had the sequence in order at an early enough point that like even with just rough mixes, we would go upstairs at the end of the night after a session and listen down, and we would listen to just one episode and be like, man, I want to listen to the other, like what, when do I, can we listen to the other one, you know? And then like Derek would be like, listen to it tomorrow, and you'd be like, no, we gotta listen to it. You know, it's like, all right, this is the right way, you know?
Try that's how you run the trial, and you have to kind of create that like feeling of like having to wait and seeing how
I
that
mean,
feels listening the
not
next day.
holding out, because really what I think it is I think a 12-song album from a band like this that tends to write 4+ minute songs, that's too much, man.
Not for
Like
me, but for some people maybe.
but to really understand, well, yeah, okay, I get you. I understand it. I understand what you're saying. I just think that the length of modern records and the CD age, while I do love a lot of records made in that time, I don't necessarily think it was a better way to ingest music than the 60s or 70s. Like there's those records that, you know, Beatles records and Hendrix and Led Zeppelin, like these records are all super short, man. When you go look at the lengths, you're like, oh my God. Well, you know, I think, what's the one Derek's been quoting that like Axis Bold as Love is like 34 minutes long or something. And I'm like, oh yeah. I went and looked at it. He's right. A lot of this stuff is shorter and no less entertaining, no less fun to listen to. And when I don't ever feel shorted, right? But at the same time, there's a reason that there's a reason that album speaks to so many people, and it might just be related to how easy it is to intake it at a length like that, you know. And you can really wrap your head around an album of that length because you can, you know, when the first times we listened to Crescent, when we got to the end, the first thing we wanted to do was restart it. That's good, you know. That's a good place to be. You want, not that I'm saying you want people to repeat your record, but like if an album is interesting enough and can stand up on itself at a short length like that, I'd say let it. I think it's good.
Yeah,
I've
all
seen
go on.
I've seen some complaining on the interwebs of folks who think we're out there for a money grab or trying to just sell more records or something like that. I have so many things I would say to that. In reality, like nobody is making any money on records. I don't know what planet these people live on. If an artist is not out there touring, they're poor, unless they're like, you know, Taylor Swift level.
Yeah, I think those fans are few and far between, and are probably not happy with a lot of things going on in their lives beyond music. I mean, I think the band should do whatever's best for the band. Everybody has a right to make as much money and make a living and do the best they can in this
It's just
crazy,
hard.
challenging
It's
world.
hard to convince people that you're not just trying to sell more product
Yeah.
when you break things down this way. But honestly, if people didn't
So
know,
what?
yeah, if people didn't know that there was 24 tracks, you know, then they would be just as happy with 5, 6 at a time for $10. You know, it's just because they know we have it all at once that they're complaining.
No one's forced to do anything. No one's forced to buy it. No one's got a gun to your head. You know, no one's forced to buy music or support it or whatever.
Nobody, and yeah, there was my favorite point about this that I've seen is like, do you think we really would have put up the album before it was available for download for free on YouTube?
Right.
We're concerned about making money off of you, like, you know.
You know, I was just wondering, is there any sort of a model of a band or an artist releasing music in this manner? And not just like in 2 parts, but in actually 4 parts over the course of several months. Has anyone ever done anything like this? Maybe with some online content or films and like a
Yeah,
series.
there's definitely been some albums like this, like sort of, you know, that were recorded in the same session and then released separately. Like a couple things that come to mind are like Radiohead, Kid A, and Amnesiac. They were sort of made at the same time and then released close together. But and like Apostrophe and Overnight Sensation, the Zappa records, same sort of thing, I think. You know, recorded at the same time, released separately. But I don't think anybody's ever really done it like this, where I think the main part of this idea is that the fan base gets to experience them communally, right? Through like sort of the YouTube release of it, which I think that's maybe what's most important about this format. Uh, for me, from a fan point of view, is like, or from me being a fan of the band, I think that's the best part of it is like, oh crap, we all get to listen to this for the first time together. Like before you can even download it and listen to it on your own, your very first time as a fan to listen to it is together with other fans who care as much as you do. I think that's a really cool experience. And I think that's uh yeah, I think that's really important to this release and what it'll mean to fans in the end. And the the releasing it in 4 parts, I uh, I kind of find the chunks to be completely satisfying in a standalone fashion. I've been over here proofing the vinyl and and doing that sort of thing with test pressings, and like they all stand up on their own. I really uh I'm super proud of what they've done, of what we've done,
You should be.
and it's you know it's all about staying true. I don't question the way that it's being released at all. And definitely Derek spitballed some of this stuff like in the control room and throughout the course of making the record, and we definitely had quick conversations related to all this stuff. And but man, it's really like he gathered everybody's vision somehow. Like he kind of, I think, just kept, and that's maybe it's definitely one of his best qualities is he talks to everybody in the organization. And throughout the course of making the record, he was talking to all of us involved in making that record. And he sort of like got the collective everything into what the final product is somehow. Like, I don't think any of us will question how it's done, because we know that there's a reason for everything, and it's been thought about. Derek is very meticulous about he was meticulous about the way that this record is being presented.
Yeah, and I'm sure he brings some of those and many of those, if not all of those qualities and that approach to the stage every night as well.
Oh, his guitar playing is just like it's just a visual, or it's an indicator of his actual mind at work. Okay, if you think his guitar playing is precise, that's how sharp his mind is as well. The
I
dude is
follow.
fire.
I follow. Yeah, and I cannot wait to hear all these songs live, all the new songs. My only gripe with this releasing these albums in this manner is that come September, after the 4th album is released in August, I'm gonna be like, okay, where are my new songs at? Where are the new songs at? We got 6, 7 more coming out. Where's part 5? I'm gonna want this every month.
Don't worry, we're gonna get back to work.
Well, the songs on the road, I think, like I was saying,
Yeah,
and Derek has talked a little bit about this too, is like, how the band is just gonna expand on them and
yeah.
grow
I
on
mean,
them, and they grow on the
I
band.
totally. I saw he was talking in an interview about how the band intends to not play them until they're out, and like that's another luxury. That's a thing of music artists of the past, which is that you used to be able to maybe play a song in a market, a new song off your new album, and unless somebody came to your show, they wouldn't see that. But now in the age of internet and cameras, you can't we I agree with them with the point, or with Derek and the band, that not playing them until they're out is the way to go, because otherwise everybody in every we play it in one market, it ends up on a video, and now everybody has heard the song before the album comes out. So it's like, I think artists of the past actually had a little bit of a luxury built in without their, and you see it with comedians too, them not wanting you to film their shows and stuff, because
Sure.
then let's get out on the internet. It's sort of that same idea where, like, so I do think that these songs, I know they're itching to play them, and I know that they're gonna go crazy places, but I do think they're smart to do it the way they're doing it, and not not blow the release of the the songs the way they were intended to be first heard. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes for the best fan experience, I
Yeah.
think, by releasing them and marketing them in the manner that they're doing. I really appreciate all the time and all the stories and going through the whole discography and a little bit about your background and diving deep into Derek and Susan and the band. It means a lot to me. Is there
Yeah.
anything else that you wanted to talk about or mention, or stories that jump out at you from I Am the Moon, or otherwise? I don't want to take up too much more of your time.
You know, I would just say that I've been in one thing I'd like to get in there is I do think that the version of the Tedeschi Trucks Band that we're seeing right now, um, this band that's about to be on tour all summer and supporting this album. This is Brandon and Gabe, and this is it's a much love for Kofi, as we know. We've already talked about this, but this band is in its like perfect form, in my opinion, right now, and I'm just excited to see what's going to happen. And if I was going to say anything else, it would just be, you know, how much I truly love working for Derek and Susan, and you know, it's not it's not an act. We're everybody who's around here is here because we really care, and we truly love what we're doing. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Where can people find and follow you?
I'm on the Instagram. It's BOBETIS. You can find me on there. I usually just post some cool work stuff.
Yeah, very very cool. By the way, we're recording this on Father's Day because
Oh, yeah.
you forgot it. You forgot it was Father's Day, but
Well,
that's
I
because you were
called my
busy.
dad. I did call my dad. Happy
Oh,
Father's Day.
that's true. That's good. And because you know you're too busy and focused on being a good father yourself to look for any recognition. So that's probably
Yeah,
another reason why you forgot it. But happy Father's Day for sure.
cool. It's all good.
For sure. Thank you again. I appreciate your time. Great stuff. Great
Thanks, Adam.
stories all
Thanks for
around.
sharing. Hey,
Looking
yeah,
forward.
thank you for doing this, man. This is it's cool for fans. Thanks for putting something like this out there.
Oh, for sure. I'm looking forward to the new music coming and recapping that and listening to it over and over again. And again, seeing it on the road be expanded and played live is going to be super exciting. I'm hitting a bunch of shows this summer for sure.
Well, awesome, man. I'll catch me out there.
Oh, you got it. Talk soon.
All right, see ya.
Later. So there you go. Episode 77 with Bobby Tees. What a fun conversation with someone who knows the band intimately. I really appreciate Bobby's time and for all the stories and insights when it comes to all things TTB. And I really do miss going to Mets games at Shea Stadium as well. Anyway, hope everyone is doing okay out there. Please check out Tedeschi Trucks Podcast on Instagram. That's at Tedeschi Trucks Podcast. And please remember to tap subscribe or follow on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on. Please subscribe on YouTube. That's all helpful stuff for me. I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Adam Choid if you want to follow me as well. The band, Tedeschi Trucks Band, their official website is TedeschiTrucksBand.com. Definitely check that out. Buy tickets to shows, check out all their merch, buy the merch, join the fan club. It is a cool site, and they revamped it fairly recently, coinciding with the release of these new songs and new albums, the I Am the Moon project. So definitely check that out. It looks really well done. It's a great website. My other podcast is People We Love. Definitely check out peoplewelovepodcast.com as well. But I think that's about all I got for today. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you as always, and let's talk soon. Peace.